Now, let's talk about the C-11 component. All parties in this House last Parliament worked in good faith to reform Canada's refugee system. And I'll grant the minister this. There was need for reform. I think the minister is correct when he says that the old system is not working. People make a refugee claim, they're denied, they appeal. Then they make an H&C application, they denied, they appeal. Then they make a pre-removal assessment application, they're denied, they appeal. It can take too long to remove people who don't have valid claims. So that's why the parties rolled up our sleeves last Parliament and worked on a streamlined, quick process to make those determinations. And the New Democrats proposed, as we have for a long time, it was our hard work that got the government to actually put into place a refugee appeal division, which I will give the minister credit for doing. The Liberals never did do it, and this minister did. But it was pushed by the New Democrats all the way. Now, the problem with this bill is that the minister then wanted to deny access to the appeal division of people that he determined to come from so-called safe countries. Now, the minister wanted the sole power to determine what is a safe country. Again, that's too much power concentrated in the hands of one person. The opposition said, why don't you have an independent panel of experts that will guide you with firm criteria? And the minister accepted that change. In fact, he praised it. He said it made the process of designation more transparent. Not my words, the minister's words in the last Parliament. More transparent. Now we come before us today, and the minister has thrown that panel out, and he wants to go back to the original proposal so that he alone determines what is a safe country. Now, the minister as well wanted to deny access to the appeal division to people who come from what he deems to be safe countries. Last Parliament, we persuaded the minister, and we said everybody has a right to appeal. You can't have a justice system where some people have a right to appeal and some don't. Imagine how Canadians would feel if you said, well, if you go to court, your neighbour can appeal the decision, but you can't, depending where you come from. And we were successful in saying that everybody had a right to appeal, no matter where they came from. While I'm on this subject, a fundamental difference between the Conservatives and the New Democrats is that New Democrats believe that every country in this world is capable of producing a refugee. There are cases where some people, it may be less likely or more likely, but every country is capable of that. In particular, the LGBT community. 100 countries in this world have some form of legal discrimination against the LGBT community. It is possible to come. Governments change. Now, the minister said, well, there's EU countries that have refugees, and boy, they've got to be safe. Right now, the government of Hungary, a far-right government, is currently passing laws before their parliament that says that they want the power to pass laws in 24 hours with 6 minutes of debate, according to the opposition parties. They're amending the Constitution. The situation of the Roma in Europe. Everybody knows in World War II that Jews were rounded up because of their faith and ethnicity. Roma were rounded up because of their ethnicity. Disabled, communists. These are people that were historically discriminated against, including Roma. There is a long, long history of established discrimination against Roma. And those people come from Hungary. They come from the Czech Republic. They come from Romania. They come from countries that are members of the EU in some cases. And those people have a right to make their claim. Madam Speaker, how are we doing for time? Do we have a sense of how much time there is? Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, the minister, again, has gotten rid of the panel of experts to advise him. I ask why. If the minister is so confident that he can choose which countries are safe countries, why would he not want the benefit of advice from experts in human rights to advise him? The very idea he praised and thought was a good idea 18 months ago. Why would we not want that? Now, this Minister of Immigration may have great faith in his own judgment, but to have one person make such important determinations as to what country in the world is safe or not, which countries are or are not capable of producing refugees, and who is an irregular arrival that will be subject to detention for up to a year without review, and penalties that might keep their families apart for a decade, I think that's too much power for one person. And I think that we should build in checks and balances on that. And I would say that would be the case no matter who is the Minister of Immigration, including a New Democrat. And I don't know who would make the argument that the system is not better served by having that kind of check and balance. Now, in terms of the biometrics, Madam Speaker, biometrics is a system whereby this legislation would have people who apply for a visa to come to this country provide their fingerprints and pictures. Now, I think that that's a model that we should be looking at, but there are significant privacy considerations, and the Standing Committee on Immigration is looking at those very considerations right now. The Privacy Commissioner has already testified, and she says that providing a fingerprint for the purposes of identification to make sure the person presenting at our borders is who they say they are is fine. But taking that fingerprint and comparing it to a wide database for other purposes or sharing that information with other countries or other bodies raises serious privacy concerns. We're in the middle of looking at those, and those are issues that I think the government would be well advised to pay attention to before we proceed down that path. Now, I want to talk about a few other things that this bill does. This bill prevents someone from making a refugee claim who has been convicted of a jail sentence of more than 10 years. Now, I've raised this issue as well. Nelson Mandela was convicted of a crime for which he received a sentence of more than 10 years. Under this legislation, were that to happen today, Nelson Mandela could not make a refugee claim in Canada. He might be able to make a humanitarian and compassionate claim, but no refugee claim. Now, I haven't heard the government explain that. It also, for the first time, gives the minister the power to refer to the IRB the case of a refugee who has now become a permanent resident, the power to strip them of their permanent resident status if it's determined that their country from which they escaped, where the circumstances have changed. Now, Madam Speaker, that is unacceptable. People come to this country seeking safety, and yet they find themselves in this legislation perhaps looking at being stripped of that status. Now, Madam Speaker, I have I'd like to make this motion. I move, seconded by the member for Saint-Bruno-Saint-Hubert, that the motion be amended by deleting all of the words after the word that and substituting the following. This House declines to give second reading to Bill C-31, an act to amend the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the Balanced Refugee Reform Act, the Marine Transportation Security Act, and the Department of Citizenship and Immigration Act because it A, places an unacceptable level of arbitrary power in the hands of the minister, B, allows for the indiscriminate designation and subsequent imprisonment of bona fide refugees for up to 1 year without review, C, places the status of thousands of refugees and permanent residents in jeopardy, D, punishes bona fide refugees, including children, by imposing penalties based on mode of entry to Canada, E, creates a two-tiered refugee system that denies many applicants access to an appeals mechanism, and F, violates the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and 2 international conventions to which Canada is signatory. Madam Speaker, I would move that motion now and await the pleasure of the House. Thank you, Madam Speaker.